Hello YouTubers, this is Gold Standard Z0924 coming at you with a wrestling related topic for today. And in this video is basically going to be a bit of a countdown list. And this countdown list pertains to me ranking the years of the Attitude Era from WWE from 1997 to 2001. So the purpose of this video is to kind of rank these years from my least favorite to favorite. So because it's a countdown list, I'm just going to rank it from number 5 to number 1 and why I ranked them the way I did. So this is also going to discuss about some of the moments that have occurred during that year and some of the matches, storylines and feuds that have unfolded throughout those 5-year span. And I just discuss why they were significant and basically pros and cons as far as those years are concerned. That's basically what you'll expect for me to hear in this video. So it's gonna be a pretty long video. So yeah, just sit back and just watch this little slideshow, just demonstrating a bit of the illustration and some of the key important events that have occurred throughout those 5 years. So without further ado, I'm just gonna kick things off with number 5. So for number 5, I have on here is from the year 2001. So 2001 was a very significant year for pro wrestling, a pretty big turning point, if you will, because the Monday Night Wars had been going on for nearly over a decade, or half a decade for that matter. It goes way back, between WWF and WCW. Going back to uh, the JCP era in the 80s, and WWE airing on the rival station TBS, which was the home for a lot of the for Southern wrestling, most notably JCP, which would eventually be bought out by Ted Turner to become World Championship Wrestling, and that war just went far back for nearly 2 decades, actually. And Monday Night Wars didn't really kick into gear until 1995 when WCW premiered Monday Nitro to have it go against Monday Night Raw. And they've been trading victories for many years up until this point. And 2001, WCW's ratings were starting, its popularity was starting to kind of wind down, and a lot of the top talents they had were either injured or they moved on to other companies to wrestle in other wrestling promotions, for that matter. And they were losing business financially, and this got to the point where around this time you had like the AOL Time Warner manage, and the people that were in charge of AOL Time Warner decided they weren't going to do anything with professional wrestling anymore. So WCW got pulled the plug, and actually WF purchased WCW and ECW around that same time. So yeah, so like I said, it's a very significant year, and 2001, why it was ranked so low at number 5 is it just people just were ready to move on, and I mean, with the lack of competition, it's like what could you do in the long run? And they did the invasion angle, and a lot of wrestling fans, diehard wrestling fans at the time, were very turned off by how some of these wrestlers from the other wrestling companies were being underutilized or being mistreated. And even some of the top wrestlers that they had, like Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page, were kind of looked at as inferior, like just other guys on the roster, just not on par with the top wrestlers of WWE. And you also factor in some of the other main eventers that weren't even there at the time, like Goldberg and Sting, Scott Steiner, the NWO with Hogan, Hall, and Nash. And most of those guys didn't even come back until like a year or two after the invasion angle ended. So it really stirred a lot of controversy in the wrestling fandom, and this was a big factor in why most of the wrestling fans were kind of turned off by what was going on, and wrestling's popularity started declining as a result of the purchase of WCW and ECW, closing its doors, and um, the poor execution of the invasion angle. So it was a big turning point for pretty much not just WWE, but just professional wrestling in general. Um, Now, putting the negative things aside, there are also some positive things to even discuss about in 2001 because they had a really enormous roster during this time. Um, a lot of guys that had been in, like I said, from WCW and ECW. Even before the purchase, they had other guys coming in like Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero. Even underrated wrestlers like Essa Rios and those sort of guys, Dean Malenko. It was just a pretty stacked roster in terms of the athleticism. A lot of technical wrestlers getting brought in. Kurt Angle as well. How could I forget about him? And yeah, there was a really like I said, big roster. There was also some pretty good pay-per-views during the early half of 2001. Royal Rumble. We got to see the Royal Rumble match and just uh, try and be a little more inventive with the Royal Rumble match was pretty cool. Having like all these hardcore wrestlers doing the 24/7 rule during the Royal Rumble match, I thought that was pretty cool. The ladder match with Jericho and Benoit for the IC title. Um, some pretty good stuff. No Way Out, the Three Stages of Hell with Stone Cold and Triple H, a feud that's been going on for about almost a year and a half. Um, what else? WrestleMania 17, a very beloved WrestleMania, as well as a very beloved pit wrestling pay per view in general. The TLC rematch from SummerSlam gets carried over to WrestleMania. Um, the father son street fight between Vince and Shane McMahon, Rock and Stone Cold, Benoit Angle, just so many top notch matches that you wonder why wrestling fans um, appreciate that particular WrestleMania year. And even though you had some downers here and there with the invasion angle and how it was treated, you also had some really pretty well received matches on here. Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon had their street fight. Um, just um, like I said, very great year in terms of the in ring quality. Um, Now, we all also forgot to mention about Stone Cold's heel turn as far as cons are concerned, and the fact that he was turning heel so many times on, when at WrestleMania 17, where Austin suddenly lined up with Vince McMahon, and then only to turn face for a bit before turning back heel during the Invasion angle when he turned on Team WWF at Invasion to side with the Alliance, WCW, ECW wrestlers combined. Um, yeah, so that really definitely hurt his character. Just because he was like this loudmouth SOB, do not trust anybody, and doesn't align with anyone. Having him turn into this cowardly villain just kind of seemed very out of character, very forced. Um, Pay per view buy rates were going down largely due to that reason of Stone Cold's heel turn. Um, so that was also another thing to kind of really point out. A lot of combined factors leading to 2001 being, while there were some good things about 2001, there were also some things that you could really point out that a lot of the uh, dip in quality in terms of the wrestling product and the booking kind of goes way back to 2001. And you may say that they haven't really recovered from that ever since. And I wouldn't agree more. So, but nonetheless, that's why I ranked 2001 at number 5. Number 4 I have here is 1999. So 1999, was a continuation of the success that WWE had had in 1998. They were just coming out of, ushering in the Attitude Era officially, having Stone Cold win his first WF title for the first time. And, they started to win the ratings war against WCW and just going with the new direction. And so 1999 rolls around, they're continuing to capitalize on what made 1998 so great. And the first Raw in 1999 had Mick Foley winning his first ever World Championship belt against The Rock in the main event. And it really told a story because, Mick Foley was just you had all these critics that were kind of looking down on him because, he didn't have, the Hollywood type of attraction look that he had. And they have all these doubters just proving him wrong, saying that he can't do it. And when he got to feud with the corporation, that really solidified him. And even the Hell in a Cell match against Undertaker also solidified him as well, even though he lost the match. But just the amount of bumps that he'd taken, falling off the cell and falling off the top of the cell, and as well as the thumbtacks, the spot there. Mankind, Mick Foley, Mankind, however you want to refer to him as, it really showed that he had a strong sense of fortitude, and and then he has the match with The Rock, and Stone Cold coming out to this massive pop to help Mick Foley win his first ever World Championship belt was very historic, and that was really when because WCW, they were still competing against Monday Nitro that night, and they were almost close to about beating WWE, in the Monday Night ratings, up until Tony Schiavone gave away the results of the Mick Foley match where he ended up that he was going to win the world title. And then it turned away a lot of the viewers. A lot of people that were watching WWE at the time were tuning over to the competition. With Raw's War, and then they were doing this whole finger poke of doom storyline where Hulk Hogan poked Kevin Nash by the chest, and then they had this rivalry going on with the Wolfpack in Hollywood for a couple months, in the summer of '98. And all that got negated when it turned out all that was a ruse because Hogan won back the belt, and reforming the NWO once again as NWO Elite. And they were just kind of sick of seeing the same storylines over and over and the same guys being on top. But getting back to WWE, the corporation angle really drew a lot of heat. It really, this was really back in the day where you actually get booed, especially when you're a heel, because nowadays you get big pops for the wrong reasons. So the Mick Foley title reign was very historic. It was very was really official when you know that WWE has triumphed over WCW for good. And it was, and as far as 1999 is, as far as it produced very historical moments, very significant historical moments, very groundbreaking, if you ask me. You had the first ever multi-man ladder match between the Hardys and Edge and Christian at No Mercy. You had a female wrestler winning a singles title belt that wasn't the women's champion, but you had Chyna winning the Intercontinental title, which not any female wrestler obviously have won the belt in any shape or form. But yeah, it was just very very significant there. Let's see. I know there was actually a lot more than that. So just a lot of good stuff. Even though a lot of it might not have aged well for today's standards. Um, you had like a non-active wrestler like Vince McMahon winning WWF title. Now, obviously, he ended up vacating the belt. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of goes on the downside of '99 because there was a lot of questionable booking during that time. A lot of title belts changing hands here and the left and right. That was the year that started it was '99. Um, the over reliance of profanity and vulgarity in the WWE programming. Yeah, you saw like stuff like Undertaker putting people on cross symbols and performing satanic ritual ceremonies. If you watch that part where they got like Dennis Knight, who was previously one of the Godwins, and they were doing like this little ritual ceremony because Undertaker had this Ministry of Darkness stable that he had at the time, and they had him convert into what most people know him as Midian. So it was a very disturbing segment for 1999 standards, and just a lot of stuff came from that character. Um, you also have the unfortunate death of Owen Hart, who was portraying as his Blue Blazer gimmick that was very popular. With the stint that he did in his early wrestling career. So they brought back the whole Blue Blazer storyline where they kind of denied the fact that Owen Hart and Blue Blazer were the same people, and it turns out that that he was in fact the Blue Blazer. Um, and then they were doing like this little stunt at Over the Edge where there was like some accident, where he was supposed to come from the rafters, and there was like a um, something happened, and then he ended up falling down on the ring post, just crash landing hard on the top of the ring post, and unfortunately, just passed away at such a young age. Um, and ever since then, Martha Hart hasn't really endorsed WWE to promote Owen Hart in any shape or form, unless it was with her consent. And he hasn't been featured in other video games or other sort of DVD promotional, um, that sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, so it was kind of there were some very controversial, questionable things that WWE has done, especially during that year. Some of the gimmick matches that they also had, like Kennel from Hell and Iron Circle matches, Items on a Pole. A lot of that stuff came from '99, and that most of the time that were never done again afterwards because Vince Russo played a big part in creating most of these match stipulations, and when he left, a lot of them weren't really done very often, and when they did, it was only just kind of once in a blue moonish. Um, yeah, so overall, 1999 was a very significant year. I didn't rank it as high as I thought I would, but I mean, I preferred other years in the Attitude Era personally, so that's why 1999 gets number four. Um, it just some good stuff, but then you also have some of the some of the violence, some of the content was a little over the top. Um, but again, this was Attitude Era for you. But so yeah, that's why 1999 goes in at number four. Number three I have here is 1997. So 1997, some people might consider this the Attitude Era. Some people consider this still to be the New Generation era, but I like to consider it as more of like a slow transition period from the kid-friendly image of the New Generation to the more cutting-edge product that Vince McMahon later issued a marketing campaign that he called WWF Attitude. So that's where the Attitude Era came to be. So so 1997 was a very, once again, a very significant year and a big turning point as to the slow this is where they were starting to kind of figure out, what to do, because the previous year in 1996, WCW had won, has started to triumph over WWE in the ratings when they brought over the NWO storyline, and Hulk Hogan, who had been a WWE's poster boy throughout the 80s and early 90s, would end up jumping over to the dark side and started to reinvent his character and rejuvenate himself to be like from everyone's role model to a more cocky, arrogant Hollywood stuck up celebrity or wrestler, depending on how you want to describe him as. And that's where the Hollywood Hulk Hogan nickname kind of originated, just to really show just the how much the fame and fortune was getting into Hulk Hogan. And bring in Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who had jumped ship from WWE to WCW, actually also played a big part in that. So the NWO, they weren't just like your typical stable that came before it, like just the goofy cartoonish gimmicks from the Dungeon of Doom days. But when the NWO started coming out, they were just doing a lot of just a lot of controversial stuff. And just coming in, interrupting commentators, and just taking over the commentary booth and taking over WCW programming in some shape or form. Just try to separate WCW as a different entity, and that's what really sold the NWO, was just trying to be its own self, and it's a company that was trying to rid away what WCW was trying to do during this time. Um, yeah, so WWE started taking notice and started to go for a more cutting edge product, and they were doing stuff like with the Pillman's Got a Gun segment, and Stone Cold just coming in and breaking into his home. Very controversial stuff that the USA was doing, and they nearly got in trouble because of USA, and they were caught off guard just because of the edgier content that WWE was pulling off at the times. And you get to 1997, that's really where a lot of the edgier stuff really taken the full gear. Um, Stone Cold started his program with Bret Hart, and they had their I was gonna say I Quit match, submission match at WrestleMania 13, which led to the double turn. So Stone Cold became the sympathetic baby face. Bret Hart just became a outspoken heel who feels that the United States was turning on him. Like every other country, respects Bret for what he does, and um, being uh, being a positive role model for kids and uh, adults, people that look up to him, that appreciate what he had to offer to the table. So yeah, so Bret felt like he had no place here in the U.S. He starts a war with the U.S. by reuniting the Hart Foundation, bringing his brother Owen and British Bulldog, and then Jim Neidhart came back, and Brian Pillman joining in the mix as well. Um, yeah, so the Stone Cold Bret feud was very influential with both guys, and especially with Stone Cold, really solidifying him as this potential top player in the making. Um, and then you also had also the year that Undertaker won his first world title since 1991, and he had been a mainstay for the company, but he could never get the brass rum up until that point. And actually getting a proper run with the belt as opposed to the 1 day title reign that he had the first time around. Um, and this was also the year that Kane debuted as well. So they were slowly building up the whole thing where Paul Bearer was gonna tease Undertaker that he was gonna unveil a secret to the world, and it turns out Undertaker having a brother, and that went on for many many months, and then Bad Blood '97 happens, and then Undertaker and Shawn were having this program during this time, And during that first ever Hell in a Cell match, which was basically like a cage match, but it's you could fight pretty much anywhere. I mean, it's you could actually fight like outside the ring and do all sorts of stuff that you couldn't do inside a steel cage. And it was very groundbreaking for its time. And and another reason why it was so significantly groundbreaking, was Kane's debut, which often gets kind of overshadowed the first ever Hell in a Cell match itself. And because when people think of the first Hell in a Cell, they think of Kane coming out and costing Undertaker the match. Um, yeah, so this also started the whole Undertaker Kane feud, and Undertaker was starting to show a little more, a bit of a more human side to him, and just really reinvigorating Undertaker's character, and not just some Western Mordican from Death Valley. He was just Undertaker as a bit of a showing a little bit of human characteristics. Um, so yeah, Undertaker actually had a pretty solid year in '97. Um, yeah, you also had the return of the Legion of Doom. So that was really cool. Another thing I almost forgot was one of the most talked about controversies in professional wrestling, and that includes the Montreal Screwjob incident that happened at Survivor Series '97 between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, where they squared off one-on-one for the WF title. And everyone remembers the moment where Shawn Michaels locks in Bret Hart's sharpshooter, and even though Bret Hart didn't tap out, Vince McMahon insists the ring announcer to ring the bell, and Shawn Michaels won the WF title as a result of that controversial ending. And Bret Hart spit on Vince McMahon, and Bret Hart does the gesture of you know abbreviating WCW, or just showing a little bit of hint that he's going to WCW. Yeah, so there was like a lot of contractual disputes going on between Bret and Vince as far back as the time that Bret Hart left, or took a hiatus after losing the belt at WrestleMania 12 in that infamous Iron Man match against Shawn. So yeah, he things just started to erupt, between him and Vince. There's just some mutual, not mutual, but more of creative differences, and eventually all these sorts of conflicts would segue into Survivor Series, and Bret Hart was gonna. It was speculated that Bret Hart was gonna take the WF title over to WCW, but that was something that was very rumored, and he was going to plan on dropping the belt the night after Survivor Series on Monday Night Raw. But, things didn't turn out the way as he thought it was going to turn out to be. And, Vince had no choice but to ring the bell, cut the match short. And, Shawn Michaels was given the WF title, and, Shawn had no idea that it was going to happen the way it did. Yeah, so I mean, the Montreal Screwjob is something that really affected a lot of wrestlers, especially with guys like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Vince McMahon. I mean, we may never know like the true story aside from those three. Yeah, but nevertheless, 1997 just was a very historic year, and that's why it's ranked at number three. Number two, I have on here. This was actually a pretty tough to consider because I was kind of back and forth between 2000 and 1998. So I had to kind of take my time and try to analyze on what made those years significant, and what are the pros, what are the cons, and some things I like, some things I dislike, yada yada yada. So yeah, this was, like I said, it was a very tough decision to make, and after giving some thought. Number two I have on this list goes to the year 2000. So 2000, yeah, this was really WWE at an all-time high in terms of creative booking and top tier talent that was out during this time. And and you had a really stacked, balanced roster ranging from the lower tier wrestlers, the mid carders, the main event scene, just all around varieties. And the tag team division was had a lot of depth to it. Thanks to the likes of Dudley Boys, Hardys, Edge, and Christian. You have these three tag teams that really brought in a tag team renaissance, and a lot of that attributed to those particular three. And the Hardys and Edge and Christian were very infamous for performing the first ever multi-man ladder match at No Mercy. This was like a tag team ladder match of sorts, which hadn't been done in WWE. Um, and the Dudleys came in, and they brought their own specialty with the tables. So eventually they started doing this extended version of a ladder match, which was called Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, which Mick Foley abbreviated as TLC. And even though WrestleMania 2000, they did have a similar type of formula of it. It was just kind of like a triangle ladder match, as they dubbed it. So even though they did use tables and chairs, they didn't really emphasize on the name until SummerSlam 2000, when they had their second encounter. And the tag team division was really not just those three, but you also had just a really big variety of it. Especially when you have backup tag teams like Too Cool, the APA, TNA, Road Dogg and X Pac, who were just kind of like a vestige of DX. Um, how many? You had like High and Tie and the Mean Street Posse. Even some of the jobber tag teams, at least, just really showed just that the tag team division can do no wrong. Um, and then you also have like the mid card scene, because by this time, you had some WCW wrestlers coming over to WWE, especially when you had Chris Jericho along with the Radicals of Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Perry Saturn. And then you also have other technically sound wrestlers like Kurt Angle, and then William Regal by the end of the year. Um, yeah, so the talent was there, and then the main event scene, you have The Rock and Triple H really tearing each other apart in their series of matches, and it really goes to show you just how far they, just how convincing their hatred they had towards one another. And even though Undertaker would come back under the American Badass gimmick, and Rock and Triple H having their Iron Man match, and just a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. And the Triple H Mick Foley stuff really propelled Triple H as this maniacal heel that you just want to see him lose, and just destroying all the heroes, all the baby faces that stand in his way, um, and retiring Mick Foley and the Hell in a Cell. Um, yeah, so this was a very significant year for Triple H and The Rock, and there was just a lot of words to really describe just how great I appreciate this year. And I really don't know what else I want to really say. Kurt Angle's rise to the top, winning the European title, the Intercontinental title simultaneously, winning King of the Ring and the WWF World title at No Mercy, all in one calendar year. It was just one of the wisest, most natural build-ups, for a particular wrestler. And Kurt Angle was that guy that, was, getting all the reactions, regardless if it was cheers or boos. Um, Now, I think the only downside to it was, you had this, because Vince Russo left, they had a writer named Chris Kretzky would take over, and not a lot of people seem to bring him up, but he had a major part in uh, undergoing some of the booking and storylines that were going on. I mean, he even thought of the pitched out an idea for the Triple H, Kurt Angle, and Stephanie love triangle. And by the end of 2000, he ended up stepping down from his position as a creative writer, and Stephanie McMahon started coming in and uh, hiring these variety of Hollywood writers who would take over his throne throughout the remaining half of the Attitude Era. So if you're wondering why WWE storylines have been very uninspiring and very offensive or uncreative in that way, some of that traces back to the change in direction as far as the booking was going on, the creative staff and whatnot. Um, and I guess Kurt Angle's WF title run, even though I enjoyed his road to the top, some of his, I think a lot of, I think his lack of his success in his WF title run the first time around what had to do with Stone Cold and The Rock's popularity, because even though Kurt Angle was WF champion, you still had guys like Rock and Stone Cold being the ones that were still the focus, and they were closing out the main event matches, or closing out the pay-per-views for that matter. Um, so yeah, so it was kind of used as kind of like a bit of a fluke champion in a way, sort of like Chris Jericho when he won the undisputed title to a certain extent. But nevertheless, I mean, despite all that, 2000 just was a very one of my second favorite years from that Attitude Era. So that's why it goes in at number two. And coming in at number one, this is actually a no-brainer, but this was the year that was the turning point for WWE. That this was the year that they really knew where they were going. That they knew um, that this was really the year that they started kicking WCW's asses in the ratings and in terms of financial business wise. And that in number one goes to 1998. So 98. Stone Cold wins the Royal Rumble a second time around. Beats Shawn Michaels to win his first world title, and in contribution to Mike Tyson's involvement, um, this really started giving WF a lot of publicity once again. And at the time, a lot of people were kind of concerned because Mike Tyson, had a boxing fight where he almost ripped an opponent's ear off. So it was a pretty big risk that WWE was taking at the time. So they brought him in anyways. They had him, they had him appear in the box seats at the Royal Rumble '98. And then when Vince announced that Mike Tyson was going to be the enforcer between the Stone Cold Shawn Michaels match, this really having Stone Cold Mike Tyson go toe to toe, and having all these stunts security guards just trying to back them out from fighting and all this sort of stuff. That really showed just how good of a job and how convincing it was seeing Mike Tyson and someone like Stone Cold, how they utilize a celebrity and not just use it for just for fan service and whatnot. It was bringing in celebrity to serve a purpose, and Mike Tyson ends up joining DX and ripping off a shirt to unveil the shirt. And and even though it turns out to be a ruse, Mike Tyson ended up turning on Shawn Michaels, and after Stone Cold winning the WF title, um, it really just kind of gave you that publicity, that something that WWE needed at the time, because that was the same reason why the first WrestleMania event got so over, and because they brought in like guys in the 1980s when they were bringing like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper and all these sorts of celebrities that were famous for their respective time periods. So WWE started to go back to those realms of what made them so great in the first place. And WrestleMania 14 really drew well business wise, and it really kind of gave a clear direction of where they were going at the time. Um, and Stone Cold and Vince McMahon, the boss versus the boss and the employee, they just can't seem to get along, and um, just going against the authority system, with Stone Cold and Vince. That was really where they knew where they were going, and that continued on for most of '98 and even going to 1999 as well. Um, yeah, so Stone Cold was really on top of the world, and appearing in all these talk shows like Regis and Kathy Lee, Celebrity Deathmatch, and then having a recurring role on Nash Bridges. So this was the year for Stone Cold, without a shadow of a doubt. And you also had some wrestlers trying to climb up the ranks, like The Rock and Triple H. Like especially The Rock. Uh, joining the Nation of Domination, and then kicking Farouk out of his own creation so that Rock could take over as leader. And same went for with Triple H, because once Shawn Michaels was out of the picture, once he lost the WF title, Triple H ended up cutting a promo and trying to overhaul DX, try to restart DX over, and bring in X Pac, who had just returned from WCW following his neck injury. And then the New Age Outlaws would also join in the mix as well to make a new and powerful DX. And obviously we all remember that segment where they tried to invade WCW. I know WWE keeps bringing this up so many times and beating you up in the head with it, but yeah, that was actually very historic as well. Because people started wondering at the time, just are they actually gonna compete with WCW? Are they actually gonna like invade the WCW show and try to rip it apart and stuff? Um, yeah, so that also The Rock and Triple H definitely benefited out of the whole DX versus the Nation storyline that went on throughout the summer of '98. And even the ladder match that was the penultimate match at SummerSlam really showed that these two did have a future for the next years to come. Um, oh yeah, and Undertaker and Mankind. Everyone remembers the Hell in a Cell match, and um, Undertaker throwing Mankind off the cell, and Jim Ross just really selling it the best of his abilities. Like, my God, that killed him, that killed him. And just all the bumps that Mick Foley took during that Hell in a Cell match at King of the Ring. Um, yeah, there was just a lot of stuff that was going on. I could just name a whole ton. Cons, there weren't really that many, and even if there were, it didn't really affect the product significantly. But even nonetheless, 1998 was very financially and even book creatively wise was a very timeless year to look back at. And when people think of the Attitude Era, first year comes to mind is 1998. So that's why it's at number one. Um, yeah, so that was pretty much it for my top five favorite years in the Attitude Era. So, what do you guys think? Do you agree with this list? Do you disagree? Um, was there any other stuff that I ended up missing out? Because, this is a, turns out, because I've been kind of rambling for over half an hour. So, yeah, so leave down your comments down in the comment section below. What was your particular favorite years? Do you have a different list? So feel free to comment down in the comment section below. And until next time, this is the Gold Standard User 924 signing out.